Before this message reaches your eyes, heaven had already seen the questions you carry in silence. There are burdens you have not fully spoken about, worries hidden beneath your smile, and battles you have fought where no one applauded your strength because no one even knew what you were enduring. But today, this message is not appearing by accident. God says, my child, slow your racing thoughts and listen carefully, because I have something urgent to place upon your heart. You have spent too much time believing that silence means abandonment and delay means denial. If you believe God is working behind the scenes, write God is working for me. Yet I tell you now, I have never stopped watching over you. Even in the moments when your prayers felt unanswered and your faith felt weak, my hand remained upon your life. You wondered whether heaven had forgotten your name, but the truth is that heaven has been arranging what your natural eyes could not see. There are seasons when I work quietly beneath the surface, not because I am distant, but because roots must grow before fruit can appear. What feels hidden to you is not hidden from me. I know the tears that fell when no one was present. I know the disappointment you buried because you were tired of explaining your pain. I know the fear that sometimes wakes you in the night and whispers that things may never change. But God says today, do not allow fear to become the author of your future. Fear only reports what is visible. Faith sees what I am creating behind the curtain of time. There are people listening to this message who have been carrying emotional exhaustion for far too long. You have tried to stay strong for everyone else while quietly becoming weary within yourself. God says, I never asked you to carry tomorrow before it arrives. You have been holding responsibilities, expectations, and uncertainties as though the weight of the world depends entirely on you. But hear my voice today, release what does not belong in your hands. There are doors you cannot force open, answers you cannot manufacture, and people you cannot control. Stop blaming yourself for battles that were never yours to manage alone. I see your efforts. I see how hard you have tried to keep peace, maintain hope, and remain faithful despite disappointment. Yet some of you are standing at the edge of discouragement because you expected things to happen faster than they did. God says, timing that feels slow to you is not slow to me. I am not ignoring your prayers. I am aligning circumstances, shaping hearts, and positioning events that must come together at the right moment. If I moved too early, you would not be prepared for what you requested. If I answered every prayer instantly, you might mistake convenience for wisdom. But I am a God who sees beyond moments and understands destinations. That is why you must trust me, not only when doors open, but also when they remain closed for a season. Father, your word says in Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Hold tightly to this promise today, because heaven is reminding you that your story is not ending where your struggle currently stands. God says, many have allowed disappointment to convince them that their best days are behind them. But I tell you, disappointment is not prophecy. Broken expectations are not final verdicts. Some chapters must close so new ones can begin. Some losses must occur because I am protecting you from paths that would have wounded your spirit more deeply than you understand. You cried over doors that shut, yet I saw dangers behind those doors that you could not perceive. You mourned opportunities that disappeared, but I was redirecting you towards something more aligned with my purpose for your life. Trust my protection even when it arrives disguised as redirection. There are prayers you will thank me for not answering exactly the way you requested. There are separations that felt painful but preserved your peace. There are delays that frustrated you but prepared you for stability rather than temporary excitement. My child, stop measuring my faithfulness by immediate outcomes. Measure it by my unchanging presence. Type "I trust God's timing" if you refuse to give up today. God says there is another reason this message is urgent today. You have been under spiritual pressure that is attempting to drain your confidence and weaken your hope. Not every battle is visible. Sometimes the greatest attacks arrive through discouragement, confusion, and internal exhaustion. The enemy wants you to believe that nothing is changing, that prayer is ineffective, and that giving up would be easier than continuing to trust. But hear me clearly, what attacks your peace is not automatically stronger than my power. Do not surrender your mind to hopeless thinking. Guard your thoughts carefully. What you repeatedly entertain begins shaping how you see yourself and your future. Some of you have accepted negative voices for too long. You have allowed criticism, rejection, or past mistakes to become louder than my truth. But God says, I did not create you to live chained to shame. I did not design your identity around failure. Your past may explain your wounds, but it does not define your worth. I see beyond your mistakes and into the person you are becoming through grace. Into your lesson, into beyond your middots and the patterns and into the person you are becoming through grace. Stop introducing yourself to life through old pain and begin remembering who you are through my love. There are relationships weighing heavily on many hearts today. God says, be careful not to confuse attachment with assignment. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to remain forever. Some people are lessons, some are blessings, some are temporary companions who reveal what needs healing within you. I know you desire loyalty, understanding, and companionship, but never chase people at the cost of losing your peace. If you constantly shrink yourself to maintain approval, you are carrying a burden I never intended for you. Love should not require the destruction of your spirit. I see the relationships that have left scars. I see the betrayal you tried to recover from. I see the loneliness you feel when expectations are unmet. Yet I tell you now, do not allow disappointment with people to become disappointment with me. Human inconsistency does not cancel divine faithfulness. Keep your heart open to my healing. I am capable of restoring trust, bringing healthy connections, and removing influences that hinder your growth. Sometimes separation is not punishment, but protection. Sometimes distance is not loss, but preparation for healthier seasons ahead. God says you are entering a period where discernment will become more important than urgency. Many rush toward what feels immediate without asking whether it is wise. Slow down and seek my guidance. Not every opportunity is meant for you. Not every voice deserves access to your decisions. The world pressures you to move quickly, compare endlessly, and prove yourself constantly. But my voice brings peace, not panic. Learn to recognize the difference between divine leading and emotional pressure. If something pulls you away from peace, wisdom, and truth, pause before proceeding. I am not the author of confusion. I guide with clarity, though not always with speed. Some of you are standing before decisions involving work, finances, family, or personal direction. You are anxious to know what comes next. God says, continue seeking me rather than forcing certainty. I reveal what you need when you need it. You do not have to know every step to trust the one who sees the entire road. If this message touched your heart, write, Haven spoke to Emmy today. My child, there are blessings forming around you that you cannot yet measure. Do not despise small beginnings or quiet progress. You have underestimated what steady faithfulness can produce over time. While you focused on what remained incomplete, I was building strength within your character. While you worried about visible success, I was shaping resilience that will sustain future victories. Some breakthroughs do not arrive with noise. They begin as inner healing, renewed courage, restored perspective, and unexpected peace. These are not small miracles. They are foundations for larger ones. Heaven celebrates growth that the world often overlooks. So stop comparing your journey to others. Their timeline is not your assignment. Their path is not your calling. I have written a story for you that does not require imitation to become meaningful. Trust the pace I have chosen. And God says today, do not ignore this sign. This is not merely a message to comfort you, but a call to awaken your faith again. You have spent enough time speaking more about fear than promise, more about obstacles than possibilities. Lift your eyes beyond current circumstances. I am still the God who restores, guides, protects, and provides. I am still able to bring peace where there has been unrest and direction where there has been uncertainty. What looks impossible to human understanding remains possible with me. The chapter you are in is not the final chapter. Stay close to my presence, remain faithful in prayer, and refuse to let temporary darkness convince you that morning will never come. Declare in faith, my breakthrough eyes combing. God says, my child, as you continue listening, do not treat these words as ordinary encouragement. Heaven is speaking because there are moments in life when your spirit grows tired without you even noticing it. You continue functioning, smiling, working, and carrying responsibilities. Yet beneath the surface there is weariness you rarely admit. I know how long you have been fighting private battles. I know how often you have replayed painful memories and asked questions that seem to echo back unanswered. There are nights when your mind refuses to rest because uncertainty keeps knocking at the door of your thoughts. You wonder what tomorrow will bring. You wonder whether the things you have prayed for will ever appear. But God says, do not allow uncertainty to become a prison around your heart. The future does not belong to fear. It belongs to me. Before tomorrow reaches you, I am already there. Before a challenge surprises you, I have already prepared grace sufficient for that moment. You are not walking into unknown territory alone. I go before you, behind you, and beside you. The reason heaven wanted you to hear this today is because you have been measuring your future through the lens of present frustration. But present frustration cannot reveal eternal purpose. What you see now is not the whole picture. There are some who have been carrying disappointment from delayed prayers. God says, I know how difficult waiting can become. Waiting stretches faith. Waiting tests patience. Waiting exposes fears you did not know existed within you. Yet waiting is not wasted when I am involved. Some of you believed this year would look different. You expected answers by now. You imagined doors opening faster and burdens lifting sooner. When those expectations were not fulfilled according to your schedule, discouragement quietly entered your thoughts. You questioned yourself. You questioned your prayers. Some even questioned whether I was listening. But hear me carefully. Heaven has not fallen silent concerning your life. Silence is not absence. Delay is not rejection. I am still moving, still preparing, and still writing details you cannot yet read. There are blessings that require preparation because premature answers can become unstable answers. You ask me for increase, yet I first prepare your wisdom. You ask me for open doors, yet I first strengthen your discernment. You ask me for restoration, yet I first heal what was wounded within your spirit. Do not resent preparation simply because it is slower than manifestation. Some of you are carrying wounds from past seasons that still influence how you approach life today. God says, be honest with yourself about the pain you have hidden. Healing cannot grow where denial continues living. You learned how to survive difficult seasons, but survival and healing are not the same thing. You became strong, but beneath that strength there remains sorrow you never fully released. There are disappointments you buried because you feared appearing weak. There are betrayals you stopped discussing but never truly healed from. Yet I tell you today, I do not shame wounded hearts. Bring your pain before me without pretending. I am not intimidated by your questions or offended by your tears. Too often people believe faith means hiding struggle, but faith is not performance. Faith is trust that brings wounded places into my presence rather than hiding them in isolation. Stop believing you must carry emotional pain in silence forever. I created you for freedom, not emotional captivity. The enemy prefers wounds that remain unhealed because pain left untreated often becomes bitterness, fear, or hopelessness. But God says, I desire restoration for your heart, not merely endurance. If you are praying for peace and guidance, type, Lord, lead my path. Father, your word says in Psalm 34:18, the Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Hold on to this truth, because many have mistaken brokenness as evidence of abandonment. Yet I draw near to broken hearts. I do not run from shattered places. Some of your deepest encounters with my love will happen in seasons where pride has fallen and vulnerability rises. Stop believing you must have perfect emotions to approach me. Come honestly. Come weary if necessary. Come uncertain if necessary. But come, too many stay distant because they think they must repair themselves before seeking my presence. But healing begins with surrender, not self-repair. I am the one who rebuilds what pain tried to destroy. I know what rejection did to your confidence. I know how criticism shaped your self-image. I know how repeated disappointment made hope feel dangerous. Yet I say again, your wounds are not your permanent identity. They are chapters, not conclusions. God says there are people listening who feel trapped between what was and what could be. You know you cannot return to old seasons, yet you do not fully understand what lies ahead. This middle place feels uncomfortable because certainty has disappeared while answers remain incomplete. But hear me clearly, transition is not punishment. Transition is often where transformation grows. Caterpillars do not become butterflies by remaining comfortable. Seeds do not become harvests by staying untouched beneath the soil. Change feels disruptive because it requires letting go of familiar patterns, familiar expectations, and sometimes familiar relationships. Yet do not fear the process simply because it feels unfamiliar. Some of you have resisted change because you equated familiarity with safety. But familiar does not always mean healthy, and comfortable does not always mean called. I am leading you beyond places you have outgrown. Stop mourning every closed chapter as though it represents defeat. Sometimes endings are sacred. Sometimes release is necessary for growth. There are financial worries pressing heavily upon many hearts. God says, I know the anxiety that comes when provision feels uncertain. I know how quickly fear enters when bills increase, opportunities shrink, or resources seem limited. But do not let lack teach you false conclusions about my character. I am not limited by human economy or earthly scarcity. Yet I also call you toward wisdom, stewardship, and faithfulness. Some prayers for provision must be accompanied by courage to change habits, seek wisdom, and trust my direction. Do not despise practical obedience while asking for supernatural intervention. I often bless the work of faithful hands and humble hearts. Some of you have feared the future because financial pressure feels relentless. But I tell you, fear cannot become your financial advisor. Panic clouds judgment. Trust produces wisdom. Bring your needs before me without shame. I know your responsibilities. I know the pressure you feel to provide, protect, and maintain stability. But remember this, your provision does not rest solely upon your strength. I remain your source beyond every earthly resource. Write Amen if you believe God never abandons his children. God says be especially careful about comparison in this season. Comparison quietly steals joy and distorts perspective. You look at others and wonder why their path seems easier, faster, or more celebrated. Social images and outward appearances tempt you to believe everyone else is moving ahead while you remain delayed. But outward appearances rarely reveal inward realities. Stop assuming that visible success equals hidden peace. Many who appear strong are carrying struggles unseen by public eyes. Comparison blinds you to the blessings already growing in your own life. It creates dissatisfaction with assignments I never intended you to reject. My child, I did not create you to imitate another person's story. Your life is not valuable because it resembles someone else's achievements. Your worth existed before accomplishment and remains regardless of public recognition. Some of the most meaningful purposes unfold quietly rather than publicly. Do not confuse visibility with value. There are also battles of identity taking place in many hearts. God says the world constantly attempts to define people through achievement, appearance, approval, or status. Yet these foundations shift too easily to sustain identity. When approval becomes identity, criticism destroys peace. When achievement becomes identity, failure becomes unbearable. When appearance becomes identity, insecurity multiplies endlessly. But I created your identity to rest in something stronger than temporary standards. You are not merely what others say about you. You are not the sum of your mistakes or accomplishments. You belong to me. The enemy attacks identity because confused identity produces unstable living. When you forget who you are, you begin accepting treatment and environments beneath what I intended for your spirit. Remember whose voice matters most. My truth carries greater authority than public opinion. God says many have also been wrestling with regret. You replay past decisions and imagine how different life might have been if certain choices had changed. Regret whispers that opportunities are gone forever and mistakes have ruined your future. But listen carefully. Regret must not become an altar where you sacrifice your present peace. Learn from the past, yes, but do not live imprisoned within it. If I redeemed broken stories throughout history, do not believe yours is beyond restoration. Some consequences teach wisdom, but shame should never become your permanent residence. I specialize in bringing meaning from broken places and purpose from painful chapters. Stop speaking about yourself as though failure has final authority. My mercy remains greater than your worst mistakes, and God says, pay attention to what you repeatedly speak over your life. Words carry power beyond casual habit. Many have unknowingly partnered with discouragement through their own speech. You repeatedly declare defeat, weakness, hopelessness, or fear without realizing how deeply those words shape perspective. I am not asking you to deny reality or pretend struggles do not exist, but speak with faith, not surrender to despair. Your words should reflect trust even when circumstances remain unfinished. Too many announce disaster before giving me space to work. Be careful what you water with repeated speech. Seeds of fear grow when constantly fed. My child, heaven wanted you to see this today because you have underestimated how close you are to new understanding. You may not see complete breakthrough yet, but something is shifting within your spirit. Your endurance is not meaningless. Your prayers are not forgotten. Your tears have not been ignored. I see every effort to remain faithful when quitting seemed easier. I see the prayers whispered through exhaustion. I see the faith you maintained even while carrying unanswered questions. Do not lose heart now. There are answers approaching that you cannot yet measure. There is wisdom coming that will make confusing seasons clearer. There are doors I am preparing that will require the very strength you are developing now. If you are trusting God with an unanswered prayer, comment, "I will keep believing." And God says this with urgency today: guard your hope. Hope is not weakness. Hope is spiritual courage, refusing to surrender to despair. The enemy does not merely attack circumstances, he attacks expectation. If hope dies, people stop praying, stop believing, and stop moving forward. But do not surrender expectation simply because the road has been longer than you imagined. Morning still follows night. Healing still follows surrender. Purpose still survives disappointment. Keep your heart open. Keep your faith alive. Because what feels delayed is not destroyed, and what seems hidden is not forgotten by heaven. God says, my child, there is something I need you to understand about this season you are living through. You have called it confusing, heavy, and uncertain, but heaven sees something deeper. This season is revealing what truly has authority over your heart. Pressure does not create character as much as it reveals what has been living within you all along. When storms rise, hidden fears surface. When delays continue, trust is tested. When doors close unexpectedly, motives and foundations become visible. Do not be discouraged by what these pressures expose. Exposure is not always punishment. Sometimes it is mercy. I allow hidden weaknesses to come into the light so they can be healed rather than protected. Some of you have discovered fears you did not know you carried. You realized how dependent you became on control, how deeply you feared disappointment, or how much your peace depended on circumstances remaining predictable. Yet I tell you today, do not condemn yourself for what is being revealed. Healing begins where honesty starts. I am not exposing weakness to shame you. I am revealing it because freedom cannot grow in darkness. There are many who have grown tired of being strong. God says, I know the burden you carry when others depend upon you. You have been the encourager, the helper, the one who keeps moving even when your own heart feels weary. You have learned how to suppress your own needs because responsibility taught you survival. Yet beneath that strength lies exhaustion you rarely discuss. You sometimes wonder who notices your silent sacrifices, your private struggles, or the prayers you whisper while trying to appear stable for everyone else. Hear me clearly today. I notice. Nothing done with sincere love escapes my sight. I see the kindness you offered while fighting your own battles. I see the times you chose patience when frustration filled your heart. I see the sacrifices made without applause or recognition. Never believe that unseen faithfulness is forgotten. Heaven keeps record of what earth overlooks. But I also say this with love: do not confuse strength with emotional isolation. Strength does not mean carrying pain alone forever. Some of you have mistaken emotional numbness for maturity, but healing requires honesty. You were never created to become emotionally unreachable simply because life became difficult. God says, be careful not to build your future upon fear disguised as wisdom. There is a difference between discernment and fear-based living. Discernment listens for my voice and moves with peace. Fear constantly imagines disaster and calls it preparation. Some of you have delayed necessary decisions because fear convinced you that remaining stuck is safer than risking change. Others have settled in environments that drain your spirit because fear told you nothing better could exist. But I did not design your life around fear's limitations. I designed it around purpose, faith, and trust. Fear exaggerates danger and minimizes possibility. Fear studies failure until hope feels irresponsible. Yet I say to you now, do not allow yesterday's pain to dictate tomorrow's potential. Your past experiences may provide wisdom, but they must not imprison expectation. Some of the very things you now avoid are areas where healing and restoration still desire to grow. I am not asking you to be reckless. I am asking you to stop treating fear as a prophet. Declare this over your life: fear will not control me. Father, your word says in Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. Receive this promise deeply, because many have allowed fear to speak louder than faith. Fear tells you you are alone, but my presence remains with you. Fear predicts defeat, but I still hold authority over outcomes. Fear magnifies problems until hope appears fragile, yet my power has not diminished. Some listening today are afraid of loss. Others are afraid of rejection, failure, sickness, or uncertainty. Some fear becoming disappointed again after trusting too many times before. But hear me carefully: fear cannot protect your destiny. It can only shrink your willingness to walk toward it. You cannot fully live while constantly negotiating with fear. Trust me enough to release what you cannot control. Trust me enough to believe that my presence is greater than your uncertainty. God says there are doors you have been trying too hard to force open. You became exhausted because you believed everything depended upon your effort alone. But not every closed door is resistance from darkness. Some closed doors are protection from directions I never assigned to you. You have cried over opportunities, relationships, and expectations that did not unfold as planned. Yet you do not fully know what I preserved you from. There are paths that looked attractive but carried hidden sorrow. There are connections that appeared promising but would have drained your peace and distracted your purpose. Trust my wisdom even when it interrupts your plans. Human vision sees moments. Divine wisdom sees consequences. Stop interpreting every disappointment as abandonment. Some disappointments are redirections filled with mercy. The road you imagined may not be the road I prepared. Yet what I prepare carries peace deeper than temporary excitement. There are people who feel haunted by unfinished dreams. God says, I know the grief that comes when hope seemed delayed for years. You imagined life differently. You pictured relationships flourishing, careers stabilizing, prayers answered more quickly, and burdens lifting sooner. When reality unfolded differently, disappointment settled over your spirit like heavy fog. Some of you quietly mourned dreams you stopped speaking about because disappointment made hope feel painful. But listen carefully, buried hope is still hope. Do not rush to declare something dead simply because it appears delayed. I am still able to breathe life into areas you considered forgotten. Yet sometimes restoration does not look like returning to the old dream. Sometimes restoration means giving you something wiser, deeper, and more aligned with who you are becoming. Be willing to let me redefine blessing. Some cling so tightly to old expectations that they cannot recognize new grace arriving. God says your peace is under attack because the world around you constantly rewards urgency and noise. People rush from task to task, thought to thought, comparison to comparison, until exhaustion becomes normal. Yet I did not create your spirit to live trapped in endless pressure. Many are physically present but emotionally scattered, spiritually distracted, and mentally exhausted. Your attention has become divided between worries, opinions, obligations, and fears about the future. But peace requires intentional protection. Not every voice deserves entrance into your mind. Not every headline deserves emotional authority over your heart. Be wise about what you consume mentally and emotionally. What repeatedly enters your spirit shapes perspective more than you realize. Some of you have fed anxiety while starving faith. You spend more time rehearsing problems than remembering my promises. Guard your inner world carefully. A neglected mind becomes vulnerable to discouragement. God says there are hidden battles many do not understand about you. People often judge what they see without understanding what you carry privately. Some have misunderstood your silence, your boundaries, or your struggles. This wounded you because you longed to be seen accurately. Yet here Maya's human misunderstanding does not cancel your value. Stop exhausting yourself trying to gain approval from those determined to misread you. Not every misunderstanding requires defense. Some people only understand through the lens of their own pain, insecurity, or assumptions. Do not surrender peace attempting to manage every opinion. If you spend your life chasing universal approval, you will lose the freedom to walk in truth. I know your heart more deeply than public perception ever will. Rest in that assurance. If you needed this message today, write God KNEW I needed THIS. There are also battles happening within families that weigh heavily upon hearts today. God says, I see the tension, misunderstandings, and emotional distance that burden you. Family pain cuts deeply because expectations of love and loyalty run close to the soul. Some of you feel responsible for healing situations beyond your power. You carry guilt over problems you did not create and cannot single-handedly resolve. Hear me carefully. Love does not require carrying responsibility for every outcome. Pray, love, and remain faithful, but release what belongs outside your control. You cannot force healing where others resist it. You cannot repair every wound through personal sacrifice alone. Stop carrying guilt for being unable to solve what requires hearts beyond your own. God says, my child, you have also been too harsh toward yourself. You criticize your own progress, compare your growth against unrealistic standards, and overlook how far you have already come. Some of you speak to yourselves with a cruelty you would never use toward someone you love. You focus intensely on weaknesses while ignoring resilience I have been developing within you. Yes, there is room for growth. Yes, there are lessons still unfolding. But stop speaking as though failure defines you. Look honestly at what you survived. Look at how you continued moving despite heartbreak, uncertainty, and exhaustion. You are stronger than you realize, not because you never struggled, but because my grace carried you through struggle. God says many of you are entering a season where simplicity will become holy again. You have chased complicated solutions, endless explanations, and constant certainty. Yet peace often returns through simple faithfulness, restoring healthy rhythms, protecting your spirit, speaking honestly, spending time with me, choosing gratitude, loving faithfully. Obedience is often quieter than dramatic expectations imagine. Some miracles begin not through spectacle, but through daily surrender. Do not underestimate small acts of faith. Mountains are moved through persistence more often than sudden emotion. And God says this urgently today: stop postponing joy until life becomes perfect. Some of you have made happiness conditional upon future outcomes. You tell yourselves you will finally breathe when problems disappear, when finances improve, when relationships heal, or when certainty arrives. But joy delayed indefinitely becomes joy abandoned. I do not ask you to ignore pain. I ask you not to let pain become the only truth you recognize. There are still gifts surrounding you, even in unfinished seasons. There is still beauty, still grace, still evidence of my kindness. Gratitude does not deny hardship. Gratitude refuses to let hardship erase everything else. Type God is my strength if you are fighting a silent battle. My child, heaven wanted you to hear this because you are standing closer to change than you realize. Not necessarily sudden change, but sacred change within perspective, priorities, and trust. Something is shifting inside you. The old ways of carrying fear, striving endlessly, and measuring worth through outcomes are losing authority. Do not resist this transformation. What I am growing in you now will support blessings you cannot yet fully imagine. So continue walking, continue praying, continue trusting when answers remain incomplete. You may feel tired, but you are not abandoned. You may feel uncertain, but you are not directionless. I remain with you in this chapter, and the story is still unfolding. God says, my beloved child, as these words continue reaching your heart, understand that heaven is not speaking merely to inspire emotion, but to awaken remembrance. Too many have forgotten how loved they truly are. Life has a way of covering identity beneath layers of responsibility, disappointment, criticism, and survival. You became so focused on enduring that you slowly forgot who you were before fear became familiar. But today I remind you again, you are not merely surviving random circumstances. You are living a story still held within my hands. Do not reduce your life to the pain of the present moment. There is more happening than what your eyes currently perceive. Some of you have become trapped in temporary thinking, believing today's struggle represents tomorrow's certainty. But storms are temporary even when they feel endless while passing through them. You have watched difficult seasons linger longer than expected and quietly concluded that maybe this heaviness will never leave. Yet I tell you now, do not build permanent conclusions around temporary pain. Pain speaks loudly, but it does not speak finally. There are hearts listening today that carry silent disappointment toward themselves. God says, you have blamed yourself for outcomes that did not unfold as planned. You replay conversations, decisions, and missed opportunities, imagining different endings had you acted differently. The mind often travels backwards, searching for control over what can no longer be changed. But hear me carefully, guilt and wisdom are not the same thing. Wisdom learns. Guilt chains. Wisdom grows. Shame imprisons. Some of you learned lessons through painful experiences and now carry unnecessary condemnation long after the lesson was received. I never intended for growth to become lifelong self-punishment. Yes, take responsibility where needed. Yes, learn honestly. But stop carrying punishment I did not assign. My mercy does not expire because of human weakness. Too many live as though forgiveness belongs to others, but not to themselves. Yet if I extend grace, why do you keep refusing to receive what heaven already offers? Some of you fear that you disappointed me beyond repair. God says, this lie has exhausted your spirit for too long. You imagine my posture toward you through the lens of human rejection and assume I stand distant, disappointed, or unwilling to draw near. But my love is not as fragile as human approval. I am not shocked by your weakness, surprised by your struggle, or impatient with your healing process. I know every chapter of your story completely. I know the victories and the failures, the faith and the fear, the courage and the confusion. And still I remain near. Some believe they must become spiritually flawless before approaching me again. Yet healing does not begin after perfection. Healing begins through surrender. Come honestly rather than hiding behind spiritual performance. I am not seeking flawless children. I am seeking willing hearts. If you are ready for a new season, declare, I am ready for God's plan. Father, your word says in Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Hold tightly to this promise, because many misunderstand what it means. It does not mean every event feels good or every season becomes painless. It means I remain capable of weaving purpose through what appeared broken. Some of the chapters you most feared would destroy, you became places where resilience, compassion, and spiritual maturity quietly developed. What the enemy intended to weaken became soil where deeper faith could grow. You do not always understand my methods while living through them, but understanding is not always required before trust. Sometimes you see purpose only after surviving what once confused you. That is why faith continues walking even when explanation remains incomplete. God says there are voices surrounding you that have influenced your spirit more than you realize. Some voices speak through people, others speak through culture, memory, comparison, or fear. Not every voice deserves equal authority within your mind, yet many have allowed criticism, negativity, and anxiety to occupy sacred space within their thoughts. Be careful what you repeatedly agree with. Agreement shapes direction. When discouragement becomes constant agreement, hope weakens. When fear becomes constant agreement, courage retreats. Some of you have unknowingly rehearsed negative expectations so frequently that disappointment feels safer than belief. But I call you higher today. Stop treating hopelessness as emotional wisdom. Protect your inner atmosphere carefully. Just as gardens require tending, your thoughts require stewardship. There are relationships still weighing upon your spirit. God says, I know how deeply human connection affects the heart. You desire loyalty, understanding, and closeness because I created people for relationship. Yet relationship pain often cuts deeply because it touches vulnerable places where love and trust reside. Some of you still carry grief over people who changed, walked away, betrayed confidence, or failed expectations. Others continue loving people who remain emotionally distant or difficult to understand. Hear me carefully today. Not every broken relationship represents your failure. Sometimes people leave because seasons change. Sometimes distance grows because hearts move differently. Sometimes healing requires boundaries rather than endless sacrifice. Stop assuming every separation means you are unworthy of love. Human choices are shaped by many things beyond your control. Release the burden of carrying responsibility for every relationship outcome. God says there are also people clinging to unhealthy connections because loneliness feels frightening. You fear release because you worry emptiness will follow. But loneliness should never become permission to accept what damages your peace or diminishes your spirit. Be honest about environments that repeatedly wound you. Love and wisdom must walk together. Compassion does not require abandoning discernment. I did not create you to remain where dignity, peace, and emotional health continually erode. Some relationships require prayerful patience, others require wise distance. Seek my wisdom rather than acting only from emotion. Write, I receive this message if you accept God's peace and direction. My child, I also see the fatigue many carry concerning prayer itself. Some of you still pray, but quietly wonder whether prayer changes anything. You grew tired of repeating needs, waiting for answers, and hoping against visible circumstances. The enemy whispers that prayer is pointless because results appear delayed. But hear me clearly, prayer is not wasted because outcomes take time. Prayer is not merely a request system. Prayer is relationship. Prayer aligns hearts with heaven even before circumstances change. Too many judge prayer only through immediate results and overlook how prayer strengthens discernment, steadies peace, and deepens trust. Continue praying, not because every answer arrives instantly, but because connection with me sustains your spirit through every season. There are burdens concerning purpose that weigh heavily upon many hearts. God says, you fear missing your calling or failing your destiny. Some feel behind compared to imagined timelines. Others worry that mistakes permanently disrupted purpose. But listen carefully, purpose is not as fragile as fear suggests. I am able to guide, redirect, and restore beyond human limitation. Stop imagining destiny as one narrow opportunity easily destroyed forever. I am wiser than your detours and stronger than your delays. Many of you place enormous pressure upon yourselves to understand every detail immediately, yet purpose often unfolds progressively rather than instantly. Faithfulness today matters more than certainty about 10 years from now. Walk with me through today and trust me with tomorrow. God says some of you have grown emotionally numb because repeated disappointment taught self-protection. You no longer cry as easily, hope as freely, or trust as openly. You call it strength, but beneath that numbness lives fear of future pain. I understand why your heart learned caution. Pain teaches protective habits quickly. But be careful not to confuse protection with healing. Walls built to prevent hurt eventually block love, peace, and joy as well. I do not ask you to become numb. I ask you to allow healing to soften places pain made hard. Your heart was never designed to remain permanently guarded against life itself. There are dreams you still carry privately. God says, I know the desires you rarely mention anymore because disappointment made vulnerability uncomfortable. Some dreams concern ministry, family, stability, creativity, purpose, or restoration. You stopped speaking about them because silence felt safer than renewed hope. But listen carefully, not every quiet dream is forgotten by heaven. I know what you long for even before words form. Yet I also say this, do not worship dreams more than you trust me. Sometimes people cling so tightly to specific outcomes that peace disappears whenever plans change. Trust the giver more than the gift. I know how to lead you toward what truly nourishes your soul. If you believe better days are ahead, comment, my story I is not over, GOP, my story I is not over. God says you are learning something precious in this season. Dependence is not weakness. The world glorifies self-sufficiency and treats need as failure. But spiritual maturity understands that independence from me is illusion. You were never designed to sustain life entirely through personal strength. Some of your exhaustion comes from trying to be your own protector, provider, healer, and guide simultaneously. That burden becomes unbearable. Dependence upon me does not diminish dignity, it restores proper order. When you release false control, peace begins returning. There are also battles involving patience. God says patience is often misunderstood. People think patience means passive waiting or emotional resignation, but patience rooted in faith remains active and hopeful. It trusts without surrendering to despair. Some of you are impatient not because you lack faith, but because you are tired. You have carried uncertainty so long that even hope feels heavy sometimes. I understand this weariness, yet do not abandon trust simply because the journey became longer than expected. Fruit ripens according to seasons, not impatience. Continue nurturing what is good. Continue choosing faithfulness where possible. Seeds planted in obedience are not wasted. God says many have forgotten the importance of rest. You live surrounded by constant demands, endless information, and pressure to remain productive. But exhaustion clouds discernment and weakens emotional resilience. Rest is not laziness. Rest is wisdom. Some of you feel guilty whenever you slow down because worth became tied to productivity, yet I never measured your value solely through output. You are loved because you are mine, not because you perform endlessly. Learn again how to breathe, reflect, and receive peace without shame. And God says this urgently today, stop assuming the worst about your future. Some of you have become emotionally prepared for disappointment before events even unfold. You brace yourselves against joy because pain taught caution, but anticipation shaped by fear steals peace before anything actually happens. Do not surrender tomorrow to imaginary disasters. I remain Lord over days not yet lived. Trust me with what you cannot predict. My beloved child, heaven wanted you to see this message because you stand in a sacred place between weariness and renewal. You may not fully recognize it yet, but something inside you is changing. Old fears are losing authority. Old identities are weakening. Old burdens you carried too long are beginning to loosen their hold. Do not mistake gradual healing for absent healing. Transformation often arrives quietly. Continue staying near my presence. Continue opening your heart. Continue believing that what feels unfinished is not abandoned. The story is still moving forward, and I am still writing chapters you have not yet seen. Declare with faith, God started in me, he will finish.